Hello and welcome to Session 5 of God's Great Love Story. This is an important week because at this point you have familiarized yourself with the entire Old Testament, all the biblical books written before the time of Jesus. In the next 3 weeks you'll have the opportunity to dive into the New Testament, which will take a closer look at the life of Jesus and the life of the early church following his resurrection. In the past 4 weeks we've seen God show up for his people in dramatic and interesting ways. We've seen him look closely at the hearts of all his people and take special care of the few who trusted and honored their Creator more than themselves. We've seen God make miracles happen to grow and protect the Hebrews, and when they fell into slavery, God sent Moses to lift his voice and defend his people. God made miracles happen so they would be set free. Once the people trusted God enough to boldly enter their new land and drive out the wicked-hearted people who lived there, God showed up in a big way to protect them in battle and limit the loss of innocent life. Even when the people took their blessings for granted and forgot about God, he still lifted up unlikely heroes to inspire the people, protect them, and bring them back to himself. He lifted up great kings like David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and Josiah to lead with integrity. When corrupt kings were in charge and leading the people further from God, he sent prophets, dozens of them, in an attempt to turn their hearts around once more. This week's readings gave you the opportunity to explore the writings and ministry of many of the prophets. Oftentimes the prophets were just regular people like you and me. Some of them were small-town preachers, and many were underestimated and overlooked. People called them crazy and said their warnings were super depressing and definitely never going to happen. But then they happened. Many of the prophets in our readings lived during a time when the nations of Israel and Judah had a great deal of privilege and material prosperity, but their hearts and actions were incredibly corrupt. People were worshiping fake gods. They were sacrificing innocent children on the altars of those gods, stealing from people in need, and taking advantage of the defenseless. Everywhere you looked, there was disrespect, pride, and disgusting oppression. God rescued his people and gave them this beautiful land, and all he asked in return is that they worship him and show gratitude to him and also take care of each other. They weren't even doing that. God's chosen nation was messing up in a big way. But when he sent his prophets to them, that was actually a pretty profound act of grace. He could have wiped them out and started over. He could have turned his back and kept it turned, but he didn't. Instead, he sent dozens of prophets to say, "My dear children, I still love you, even after all this. Come back to me and we'll get through this mess together. You've really messed up and you've brought a lot of disaster on yourselves. But I haven't given up on you. I'm willing to give you another chance. You're hurting innocent people, and I can't stand by and let you think that's okay. I can't keep bailing you out if you're going to keep pushing me away and destroying each other. I love you too much to be a father who ignores that. So there will be a time of justice and exile, but that time won't last forever. It will last long enough so that your grandchildren will hopefully not be owned by the same greed and materialism that you are. It will be long enough that my children will learn to trust me again instead of blocking out my voice and relying on themselves. This exile that's coming will be hard, yeah, but it won't be the end. On the contrary, it will offer your nation a fresh start, a chance to be better than what you have become." And even after all that, the people wouldn't listen. Even after the prophets gave inspiring speeches and produced great miracles to try to convince the people to come back to God, many people still didn't believe. They kept relying on themselves and their idols. Since the people refused to accept God's help or guidance, God said, "This breaks my heart, but if you don't think you need my protection, you're not getting it this time. Have it your way." And the enemy armies took over the land, killing many and exiling the rest. Even in the darkest years of the exile, God remained close to those who invited him to come near. He made amazing miracles happen to protect his faithful few in Babylon. He kept Daniel from being eaten by lions, and he kept Daniel's 3 friends from burning up in a furnace. God lifted up a new generation of prophets to offer hope and encouragement to the people and help them know that an age of beauty, peace, and safety was coming soon. In the presence of Ezekiel, God brought an entire cemetery of dried up skeletons back to life. just to prove that God is capable of injecting hope and new life into even the most hopeless situation. It's not over until He says it's over. So God brings a refreshed and restored people back to Jerusalem, and they work together to rebuild their nation piece by piece. Many hearts are changed, but the generations that follow begin to take their nation and their God for granted yet again. They become shallow, ambivalent in their faith, and ambivalent about the call to serve others. It sounds a little like certain privileged corners of our society and of our church today. It's clear that even after all the times God has rescued them, all the laws He created for their own good, and all the lessons He hoped they would have learned by now, the most eternal truths have still not reached the hearts of the people. They're still missing the point. That's where Jesus comes in. In a world broken by oppression, pride, and hypocrisy, God sends a piece of Himself into the world to show us a better way. Jesus comes to show us once and for all who God really is and what love really means. He comes to make us take a hard look at ourselves and take a more gracious, forgiving look at each other. He calls us to turn society on its head and begin treating people as valuable, worthy children of God. Looking at our world today, there's still a lot that we can learn from Jesus. There's still a lot that even Christians can learn from Jesus' beautiful example. I hope that this week's readings will help you learn from that example in new ways so that you may experience new life and true change in your own heart. Be blessed, and I'll see you next week.